Hold up, rewind, do over. Sometimes when we make a mistake, we might say to ourselves, I should have known better. And other times, especially when we accidentally spill grape juice on our brand new white rug, we just want to throw our hands up in the air and scream, oopsie daisy. Well, today we are celebrating those classic oopsies because it turns out mistakes happen to the best of us, even artists. He was fresh off his stint in Paris, and his blue period, which consisted of paintings with a lot of blue and somber subjects, they found it tucked away in a storage room at the Musée National. Picasso in Paris, and it was covered with grime and an old bad varnish that hid the original colors underneath, and the canvas had been stretched to such a tight frame that it warped the image and made it almost impossible to see. Just ask Henry Moore. In 1948, Moore was traveling through Italy when he stopped at the Galleria Borghese in Rome. He was so inspired by the classical sculptures there that he started sketching Bernini's masterpiece, The Ecstasy of St. Teresa. Then disaster struck. He slipped and fell down a flight of stairs and broke his arm. Yikes. Unable to sculpt with his right hand in a sling, Moore needed to find a new way to create. But he was already knee-deep into the frescoes decorating the walls of the Medici chapel when he realized he was in too deep. To make matters worse, he kept messing up. He pulled a sneaky move and covered his mistakes with scaffolding so no one could see. We're not talking about a forgery or a bad copy. We're talking about the real deal. That happened to a French woman named Delphine Lebove in 2019. She was cleaning her grandmother's house after she passed away. Have you ever made a mistake that turned out to be a stroke of genius? Tell us about it in the comments below. And while you're down there, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an epic art adventure. We'll see you next time. And while going through her things, she found a painting that her grandmother had purchased at an antique store years ago. It was a still life with 2 grapes in a leaf, and it was signed Van Gogh. Now, Delphine knew Van Gogh was famous, but she wasn't an art expert. And her grandmother told her that she paid just $60 for it, so she didn't think it was a big deal. But then one day the scaffolding collapsed and Medici's grandson, who was also an art patron of Michelangelo's, there are at least 4 versions of that painting by Van Gogh. But it turns out the one that Delphine had was actually the first version from 1889, and it was worth around $100 million. And yes, that's a million. Unfortunately, while she was hanging on to the painting, she decided to spruce up the frame, and because she didn't realize it was a priceless artifact, she used a staple gun to attach some gold-colored aluminum to the frame. What was supposed to be a quick DIY project nearly destroyed a masterpiece. Luckily, an art expert saw photos of the painting online and alerted Delphine to her mistake. With help from an art restoration specialist, they removed the staples and cleaned the painting. And in 2021, it sold at auction for $71 million, which proves that sometimes you just can't put a price on a mistake. We don't know what exactly went down next, but according to legend, Medici stormed out of the chapel, ripping off his silk stockings and throwing them at Michelangelo's head. The artist finished the frescoes, but we can totally understand why he never wanted a fresco again. It took 3 years for the team to painstakingly clean the painting and return it to its former glory. He said of the experience, "My arm was in a plaster of Paris sling and could unuse my right hand for a year. I did a lot of drawing and some small sculptures with the left hand. This enforced change of hand was very helpful, as it made me see sculpture in a different way." Although Moore had mastered sculpting with both hands before the accident, this change in technique created a whole new style for him. His maquettes became much looser and more energetic, and he focused more on the flow of the lines instead of trying to capture a likeness. Before the fall, his sculptures were more classically inspired and followed traditional techniques, but afterward, they had a distinctly modern feel. In fact, one of his maquettes from that period, called Reclining Figure with Ball, is now considered a masterpiece and is worth over $1 million. That's one expensive oopsie. And they found that what critics once thought was a lazy piece of work, because it didn't have any of Picasso's typical blue hues, was actually a transitional piece between his blue period and his rose period. And it showed that Picasso was experimenting with color and style way earlier than anyone knew. They were rich, powerful, and they loved art, especially when it glorified them. So they hired the most popular artist of the day, Michelangelo, to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. While everyone was looking up at his masterpiece, though they didn't notice another project he was working on in secret. Michelangelo hated fresco painting, and he only agreed to do it because he needed the money. Fresco is a type of painting done directly onto a wet plaster wall, and it's difficult because once the paint is applied, it cannot be taken back. So the artist has to be prepared and precise, and it turns out that what was once a massive flop was actually a really important piece of art history. Whoops. But Picasso was ready for something new. He put a bold splash of pink into this piece, which was unlike anything he had done before. The painting became known as the Pink Period, but it wasn't exactly a critical success. Upon its debut at the Paris Salon d'Automne show, critics were like, "Whoop-de-doo, a pink person." Not exactly glowing reviews. And to add insult to injury, Picasso forgot to sign the painting before he shipped it off to Block. Needless to say, the whole thing was just a big old mess. And sometimes those oopsies can change everything. So let's talk about epic oopsies and how mistakes changed the course of art history. Part 1. A painter runs out of paint. When Pablo Picasso was commissioned to paint a portrait of a woman named Suzanne Bloch in 1903. Fast forward to 1978, 75 years after the painting's debut, and it was rediscovered by art restorers who were working on another piece. Part 2. Losing your balance. It's not just painters who make mistakes. Even sculptors can trip up every once in a while. He experimented with making maquettes or small-scale models of sculptures, and he used his left hand to build them. Part 3. The wrong kind of fresco in the Renaissance. It was hot, especially in Florence, where the Medici family was having a major moment. Michelangelo preferred working with easel paintings, which allowed him to start and stop at will and make changes as needed. Part 4. Painting over a masterpiece. Okay, this mistake was a total oopsie-daisy. Imagine that you accidentally painted over a priceless Van Gogh. And if you're thinking, hey, still life with 2 grapes and a leaf sounds kind of generic, you're not alone. And now it's time for you to make a masterpiece.